A paper came out a few weeks ago that's got the endurance world arguing again. Tim Noakes, carbohydrate and performance. And it goes something like this. You don't need as many carbs as you think. 10 to 30 grams an hour is enough, according to this paper. The high carb stuff, overhyped, overrated. Predictably, people have divided into camps. One side treating it as vindication, the other dismissing it because it's Noakes, and they've already made up their minds. Neither response is useful. So what does the paper actually say? What does it get right? Where do the experts disagree? And what does any of it mean for regular cyclists trying to fuel properly? Before the science, I need to talk about who wrote this because it affects how the paper is being received. Noakes has made genuinely important contributions to exercise physiology. The central governor model, pacing theory, the idea that fatigue is regulated by the brain, not just a fuel tank running empty. That work really shifted how researchers think about endurance performance. But he's also become one of the loudest advocates for low carb, high fat fueling. And that advocacy has come with controversy, not just scientific disagreement, professional conduct proceedings as well. So in South Africa, he faced charges related to nutrition advice he gave on social media, infant feeding, and a low carb diet. The case dragged on for years. He was found not guilty on final appeal in 2018, but I'm not bringing this up to dismiss him. The acquittal stands, but it explains why this paper isn't being read neutrally. For some people, it's confirmation of an entire worldview. For others, it's suspect. Neither is a useful starting point. The paper should be evaluated on what it claims and what evidence supports those claims, not on tribal nutrition politics. So what does Noakes say? The central argument is fatigue during prolonged exercise isn't mainly caused by muscle glycogen depletion. It's caused by falling blood glucose. If that's true, the point of eating carbs during exercise is to keep blood glucose stable, not to replace what your muscles are burning. From that, he argues you don't need much. If the goal is preventing low blood sugar, you only need somewhere around 10 to 30 grams per hour. He cites a study where 10 grams per hour eliminated hypoglycemia and improved time to exhaustion in athletes who were adapted to low carb diets. And the paper explicitly questions modern guidelines, which, for many of us in cycling now, we're looking 60 grams as a very minimum starting point, up to 90 grams for most rides. He calls this unjustified. And that's a big claim. Most serious athletes now are eating way more than 30 grams per hour, and they seem to be going faster than ever. So let me try to be fair. Some of it seems solid, at least from what I can follow. The old models where your muscles run out of glycogen and just stop working doesn't really hold up. Researchers don't see catastrophic contractile failure at exhaustion. They see athletes slow down, change their pacing, feel terrible. And that's regulation, not a fuel gauge hitting empty. Noakes is also right about blood glucose matters. A lot of studies show that when performance falls apart in low effort, blood glucose is dropping even when muscle glycogen is still available. Eat something, performance recovers. Too quickly for glycogen resynthesis to fully explain it. So the critique of the simple fuel tank model seems valid. The emphasis on blood glucose, reasonable. The problem, as I understand it, is what he concludes from that. Here's where it gets contested. Noakes moves from preventing low blood sugar is necessary to preventing low blood sugar is sufficient for optimal performance. Those aren't the same thing. Yes, if your blood glucose crashes, you're done. But it doesn't follow that keeping it stable is all you need to perform at your best. The evidence he leans on is mostly time to exhaustion studies, ride until you can't. Useful for understanding the mechanisms, but that's not how racing works. In a race or a long ride, you're not trying to avoid stopping. You're trying to sustain high power, respond to surges, attack, recover, and go again. That depends on how fast you can regenerate ATP. Carbohydrate supports that. Fat oxidation is much slower. And there's research showing performance keeps improving as carb intake goes up, even when blood glucose is already stable. If carbs only mattered for preventing hypoglycemia, you'd expect performance to plateau once glucose is fine. It doesn't. The low carb, high fat evidence isn't as clean as the paper implies either. The supernova study with world-class race walkers, one of the best controlled studies out there, showed that a ketogenic approach impaired exercise economy and hurt performance during intensified training. Now, I'm not in a position to judge whose interpretation of the data is correct, but I can see that respected researchers disagree with Noakes on this, and it's not settled. So let's talk about what riders are actually doing. Most endurance athletes now start at 60 grams per hour at a very minimum. Many push upwards of 90, some much, much higher. That's not random. It's come from years of experimentation, gut training, and results. Race speeds have increased. Athletes sustain higher power for longer. Training density has gone up. Recovery is much better. Now, I'm not claiming carbs are the only reason. Better training, better equipment, more professionalism, all of it contributes. But it would be strange to ignore the pattern. High carbohydrate fueling has coincided with real performance improvements. In my own coaching and my own racing, performance tracks with fueling. When nutrition is dialed, the results are better. When it's not, things fall apart in predictable ways. And that's not science, that's just pure anecdote on what I've seen for myself and those around me. There's another piece the paper doesn't really address. Training, recovery, the stuff that matters when you're not just doing an effort in the lab. Cyclists aren't trying to complete a single long ride without bonking. They're trying to complete weeks and months of training, maintain quality late into blocks, recover fast enough to actually express their fitness. Higher carb availability seems to support this. There's a lot of applied sports nutrition research linking carbohydrate to training quality, adaptation, long-term performance development. The Noakes paper is built around acute bout logic. Can you finish this one session without hypoglycemia? That's a pretty limited question. It doesn't capture what matters for real training system. A quick word on why this paper landed the way it did. Nutrition is weirdly tribal. Low carb has become an identity for some people, not just a strategy. Same with high carb. When a prominent figure like Noakes publishes something, it gets absorbed into those battles immediately. Social media compresses that nuance. A careful argument about blood glucose regulation becomes, Noakes says you only need 20 grams per hour. People react to that instead of the actual paper. The low carb trial case didn't help, made Noakes a symbol, either a martyr for truth or a dangerous contrarian, depending who you ask. Neither framing is useful for evaluating the science. The paper should be read as what it is, a narrative review with a clear argumentative aim, published very recently, will probably generate responses from other research who see it differently. One interpretation, not a verdict. There's another layer to this that explains a lot of the noise. The paper doesn't use this framing, but it helps make sense of how people are reacting. A lot of arguments are actually about different questions. There's a growing group in endurance sport focused on long-term metabolic health, insulin sensitivity, metabolic flexibility, avoiding chronic overfueling. From that perspective, questioning high carb intake outside of hard training and racing makes sense. Don't fuel easy rides like races. Don't eat 90 grams an hour if you're just riding zone 2. Match intake to demand. That's pretty reasonable. Then there's the performance focus group, highest sustainable power, durability late in events, recovery between hard efforts under those constraints. Carbohydrate during competition becomes a deliberate tool, not something you do all the time, but something you deploy when it matters. Now, these aren't opposites. You can care about metabolic health and still fuel hard sessions and races aggressively. Most good practice already does that. The problem is when a paper framed around one context gets treated as guidance for all of them. The Noakes review fits more comfortably with the don't fuel everything aggressively camp. Fair point. Not every ride needs gels and carb mix, but it's being read as you don't need high carbs for racing either. And that's a different claim, and the paper doesn't really support it. Neither group is wrong. They're answering different questions. The problem is when people switch questions mid-argument and don't notice. Where do I actually land? I am in favor of high carbs. I'll be upfront about that. I haven't gone as high as some, the 150 grams an hour crowd, but I feel at the higher end of what's conventional, and it works for me. It works for the riders I coach. Now, I am not qualified to settle the scientific argument. That's for the researchers to fight out. But as a coach, I have to make practical decisions. And right now, the weight of the evidence and the weight of practice both point towards higher carb intake for hard racing, long rides, day in, day out. The Noakes paper asks a useful question. Why does carbohydrate work? Challenges lazy assumptions about mechanism? Fine. We should actually think carefully about why we do things though. But the answer isn't to underfuel and call it science. Preventing hyperglycemia is the floor, not the ceiling. For most riders racing hard or long durations, starting at 60 grams an hour and working up is still the approach I'd recommend. Easy rides, less perhaps. Short efforts, maybe nothing. Context matters. If future performance-based trials at race intensity support lower intakes, I will change my mind. That's how it's supposed to work. Now, I'm not going to pretend performance hasn't improved alongside high carb strategies. It has. Race speeds, power outputs, training loads recovery, all trending up in an era of aggressive fueling. Doesn't prove the mechanism, but it's not nothing. The Noakes paper challenges the story we tell about why carbs matters. It doesn't challenge whether they matter, different things. The scientific debate will continue. Researchers will soon respond. More data will come. That's how it works. In the meantime, the decision is yours, not Noakes's, definitely not mine. Pay attention to what works for your body in your events. But I know what I'd do. So saddleupcycling.co.uk if you want to get in touch, saddle up and just enjoy those carbohydrates. Cheers. See ya.